We are on the cusp of one of the biggest launches in FPV, and that is DJI O4. Now, I believe this is going to launch on Thursday, the 9th of January. I won't be involved because DJI hate me, but what I thought I would do is, instead of having a video on the day, because I won't have it, and in fact, I won't be making content around this for quite some time, instead, I thought I'd put something together to collate all of the rumours and just sit down and have a chat with someone who's been talking about this for quite some time. Now, this person we're going to talk to today is quite a controversial person. A lot of people really don't like him or his channel. Some people call him a DJI shill. Some people call him a DJI hater. Cadex shill, Cadex hater. And the truth is, he's a person who can't win whatever he does. However, he is someone who does know a little bit about FPV. He's a person who is often happy to share his insights. So I thought we'd sit down with him and get his thoughts on what we should expect from this launch. Hello everyone, today I am here with Ian from Mads Tech. Hi everyone. And the idea of this video is to give you a bit of an overview of what to expect with the launch of DJI O4. Now, none of us have it, but the idea is Ian will have a bit of a talk to us. Hopefully we'll be able to, in this video, just give people an overview of what to expect. As you said, it's not a review. I don't have it. But it'll give you a baseline to walk into the reviews with, and then at the end of it, you can make up your own mind. But hopefully it might cover off some of the questions that you may have as well. Okay, so let's get started. What exactly is releasing? So DJI is going to launch O4 air units. In fact, there's going to be two. It's the first time since the original system that there's going to be two, although technically DJI never released two. They only ever released an air unit. They sold the Vista or the Link under different brands, but with this time we're getting two air units from DJI. We're getting an O4 Pro, which in essence is the direct replacement for O3, new features, improvements, but we're also getting an O4 Standard, which is a lightweight, smaller air unit, less features, but allowing you to build it into a smaller aircraft. So what do we know about these so far? So when it comes to the air units, we obviously have the difference in spec between the air units themselves, but you then have like an umbrella spec for the product. So O4 itself, both air units are designed to be used with specific DJI FPV goggles. So for instance, the O4 Pro and the O4, or the Lite as I call it, will work with the goggles 3, the goggles N3, the goggles 2, and the goggles Integra. Unfortunately, these new air units will not work with the V2 goggles or the V1 goggles. It is only goggles 3, goggles N3, goggles 2, and goggles Integra. And there is some complexity around that as well, which we will talk about in this video, because not everything works on all of the goggles. And then you also have the complexity of the remote controllers as well, very similar to what we have with the Avata 2. So you said there's two. What do we know about the Pro, that first one? So the Pro is the direct replacement for O3, basically. So the Pro is going to be the same sensor as we've seen on the Avata 2 over there, or the DJI Action 4. So it's a 1/1.3 inch sensor, much bigger than we've had before. It has the same image processing chip as O3, but that is the same image processing chip that is also used in the Avata 2, the Neo, the Action 4 as well. And what I would say is, from an image quality perspective, the O4 Pro camera should basically be directly on par with the Avata 2 or the DJI Action 4. It is going to give that level of performance. Now, there are going to be some differences in the recording modes that you might have compared to the Avata 2 or the Action 4. Okay. But in essence, from an image quality perspective, it should basically be the same. It's the same lens, f2.8. It's not the f2.0, which we thought from early links, f2.8. But it basically is going to be on that level. I think it's probably fair to say that O4 Pro is going to be the first absolutely viable action camera replacement. Whereas O3 could replace an action camera in certain scenarios, I think O4 Pro for most people will, although there are some scenarios that it might not, and there are still limitations between the frame rate latency on O4 as there were on O3. And for people who don't understand that, is the frame rate is linked to the latency mode. And as a result of that, the lowest latency mode is the 100 frames a second mode. But that means you have to record in 100 frames a second. If you want to record in 30 frames a second, you can, but that isn't the lowest latency mode for flying. And there is still this compromise on O4 that you had on O3 where the latency is tied to the recording frame rate. Yeah. And that's about the only thing that might make people still want to carry their own action camera. So do we know what the specs are on these? Well, the main specs, okay, a lot of this is leaks, so you should look at the main reviews for the main specs. But the very basics are O4 Pro, 30-gram air unit. We've got a new camera, same spec as the Avata 2 and the Action 4, 1/1.3-inch sensor, f2.8 lens, 155-degree field of view, aperture, as I said, f2.8, and equivalent focal length of 12 millimeters. Supports ISO range 100 to 256,000. Recording modes. And again, this is all stuff that might move around a bit, but as we understand it today, it'll do 4K in 4:3 up to 60 frames a second, 4K 16:9 up to 120 frames a second, and it will also support 2.7K 4:3 to 60 frames a second, really, and 1080p 4:3 to 120 frames a second. And that 1080p 4:3 mode is an interesting one to remember because we will talk about that with something called sport mode a little bit more later on. It can record at 130 megabits a second, supports standard image quality, D-Log-M, supports normal, wide angle, and there's a new ultra wide angle mode, as I understand it, coming too, which is more comparable to GoPro SuperView, which will be quite cool.
Okay, that's nice.
Dual antennas on the Pro Air unit, supports up to 33 dBm of RF output as the O3 did, and it works on the 5 gigahertz band, and it is using that new O4 chipset that we first saw in the Avata 2, later in the Neo, Goggles 3, Goggles N3. So what about this new Lite Air unit? What do we know about that? Yeah, there's also the Lite or the Standard, which I'm referring to it as. And this is a single board VTX. And genuinely, wow, I didn't think it would be possible for DJI to do this.
No, I didn't.
Honestly, I just didn't think they'd be able to get it onto a single board, but they have. There are some technical things that have allowed them to do this. So for instance, moving into the new chipset means they can save on a NAND chip, which saves some space. The new chipset's a bit smaller, things like this. But they have been able to make a single board solution. I'm hearing, and this is whispers, the weight for the PCB is about 6 grams.
Wow.
And all up with an antenna, about 10.2, wow, 10.3 grams is what I've got on a sheet that someone sent me. And that is what we're going to see for the Lite. Now, there is obviously a difference in voltage inputs as well that the two could take. So for instance, the Lite is sort of 1 to 3S rated, but you've got to be careful with that 1S because the specification, and can I just use your mouse? Is that okay? Yeah, so I can just scroll down on this image that we've got up here.
Yeah.
The voltage specification says 3.7 to 13.2. 3.7 is not 1S. For this to be able to be used properly on 1S, it's going to need to work down to about 2.5 volts. And I've seen no evidence it does today. I could be wrong. Reviews will tell us about that. But the truth is right now, they're saying 3.7 volt, which makes it more a 2S VTX, not a 1S VTX.
Yeah.
Something to note as well between the differences between the Pro and the Lite. So as I said earlier, the Pro has this lovely large 1/1.3-inch sensor, 20mm camera on the Pro with a really weird camera mounting. The Lite uses a new 14mm camera. We believe it's the same camera as you get on the Neo. So it's a half-inch sensor. It's probably going to be the best looking 14mm camera available on any system today.
I can see that.
But we're going to have to wait and see. But I'm guessing that's what it's going to be. It's still got the same chipset, so it still supports Rocksteady as the Pro does, supports all of that. There are some differences in the modes, though, that it supports.
Okay.
So, for instance, if we just take a look, we've got 4:3 up to 60 frames a second in 4K. Okay. It doesn't support the 2.7K modes, the simple one. So it'll do 4:3, 4K to 60 frames a second, 1080p. to 4:3 to 120 frames a second.
That's not bad.
In both 4:3 and 16:9.
That's all right.
But what it doesn't support is the 4K 120 frames a second in 16:9, whereas the Pro does.
Okay.
There are also a lot of other little sort of changes as well. So for instance, as I said earlier, the Pro supports up to 130 megabits a second of recording.
Okay.
The Lite only supports up to 100, doesn't support D-Log-M.
Bit more restricted.
And it has a lower RF power output as well, but we'll talk about that a bit more in a second. So there are differences in spec between the ear units, but some of them are between the system itself. Yeah, so from a systems perspective, both ear units, as I said, will work with all 4 of those goggles. So goggles 3, N3, 2, and Integra won't work with V2s, won't work with V1s. There are differences, though, as I've said, from an RF. So you've got lower bit rates available on the Lite. What it feels like to me is because DJI have created a single board VTX with no heat shielding on, it doesn't look like there's anything on that.
Bit of a surprise.
It's like they've underclocked it. They've had to underclock it to keep the thermals under control, and as a result of that, you've got lower bit rates, less modes available. Some of the modes will be dictated by the camera.
Yeah, they will.
But predominantly that's the case.
That makes sense.
From an RF perspective, they both have the same chipsets, but there are differences in output. So for instance, the Lite has a single antenna, lower RF output, up to 23 dBm, whereas the Pro supports up to up to 30 dBm. The Pro supports up to 33 dBm.
Okay.
And that's the big difference on it. So you've got higher outputs available on the Pro compared to the Lite.
Okay.
Again, single antenna, but there is a reduction in the bandwidth, but that isn't confirmed.
Right.
I will say the 50 megabits I was told might have changed. So I will say that. And actually, DJI might have got it working with 60 megabits a second.
And this is all rumors.
Again, we're dealing with leaks here. Not everything is going to be 100% correct. Overall, it should offer similar performance.
Okay, that's good.
With regards to the range of them, it's going to be complex. I was shown a spec sheet that said 10 kilometers for the Lite, 15 kilometers for the Pro, but I don't know how accurate that is. So you've mentioned some of the goggles that it's going to work with. There's obviously some complexity around this stuff as well, isn't there? Yeah. So as I've said, when it comes to goggles compatibility, this is all a bit complex as well, because as I mentioned earlier, there is now something called race mode that DJI have introduced alongside O4, and it works on both the ear units. So it works on the Standard or the Lite, and it works on the Pro. Race mode has a lower latency mode than the Standard ear unit allows. It allows latency as low as 15 milliseconds on the Pro ear unit when used with the goggles 3. The Lite ear unit when used with the goggles 3 is actually higher latency.
Okay.
Which is a bit weird.
Yeah.
DJI is saying it's 20 milliseconds on the goggles 3 compared to the Pro.
Okay.
That's 15 milliseconds. Bit strange that the Lite one has higher latency.
Yeah.
That might be simply as a result of the underclocking of the chipset, or it could be as a result of the camera.
That would make sense.
Race mode, as I understand it, and this isn't confirmed, there's not any official public information out there on this, is race mode is race channel allocation.
Okay.
Forced 1080p 100 frames a second mode.
Okay.
Limited bandwidth. And that's about all I know right now.
Okay.
What we do know, though, is it has lower latency than the standard operating mode. So you have the normal operating mode, and then you have the standard. You have the standard mode, and then you have the race mode.
Okay.
And the race mode is designed to fix it. 1080p 100 frames a second. And that is going to be interesting to look at, because what we don't know is for DJI to be able to get that latency down, what have they had to do? What have they had to take out of the link?
What's changed?
My personal belief is they've probably taken out some forward error correction. The link probably won't be as resilient, probably won't have as good penetration.
Yeah.
In theory, a racing link won't need it anyway. So why a racing link would need good penetration? It wouldn't. I don't think this racing mode is going to be the link everyone uses all of the time. The standard modes are what's probably going to be used.
I think you're right on that.
And I'm expecting the latency on that to be comparable to O3. So normal mode, I'm not really expecting much of a latency improvement.
Okay.
With regards to latency, I should also add the N3 obviously are compatible, but they are higher latency because they are limited in the refresh rate. They can only do 60 frames a second or 60 hertz on the screen. So the latency on all the modes on the N3 is higher. With regards to this mode, though, you also need to understand that there is a limitation. As I said earlier, all of the goggles, so the goggles 3, N3, goggles 2 and Integra, all work with O4, but not all of the goggles support the race mode.
Right.
Only goggles 3 and N3 support race mode.
Okay.
Goggles 2 and Integra will not have the race mode. You will be able to use it just like you used O3, but you won't have the race mode functionality. That functionality is only on the goggles with the new chipsets, which is these. This will be hardware that is causing this because it is a chipset difference. It is not a software difference as far as I can tell. Our feelings are that DJI have been able to optimize the latency as a result of the new chipset and things like that.
That makes sense.
So what about the remotes? What's the situation there? Yeah, sorry. So those 4 sets of goggles are compatible.
Okay.
Nothing on the older stuff. With regards to the remote, things are a bit more complex, and it's pretty much what it was with the Avata 2. So when using the O4 with the goggles 2 or the goggles Integra, you have to use this thing, the FPV Remote version 2.
Oh, that fit, yeah.
When using the O4 with... Sorry, if you want to use DJI's remote, you use this one, the FPV Remote 2.
You're not forced to.
If you want to use O4 with the goggles N3 and goggles 3, you have to use the FPV Remote version 3. What you can't do is use the Remote version 2 with the goggles 3 or N3. You can't cross match. And the reason for this is they have different RF protocols.
Yeah, the communication.
Now, it is an assumption right now that the RF behavior on O4 is going to match what they did with the Avata 2. And that is that the new remote communicates with the goggles and the goggles communicate with the drone.
Yeah.
And that means that everything is tunneled through the goggles. I have heard some whispers that DJI have optimized the way the remote controller system works. Remember, you don't have to use a DJI remote, but if you do, and I've always recommended not using one, in fact. It's never been the best thing in my mind. But I do think, my understanding is, I should say, that DJI have optimized it, but we're going to have to wait and see how that looks.
That makes sense.
What is interesting about this is probably race mode as well. I think this plays into race mode because I suspect the change in RF behavior has allowed DJI to do something. One big change on O4 compared to O3 is O4 now only supports 5 gigahertz band. So 5.8 gigs in the US, 5.2 and 5.8 gigs in the EU. O3 was dual band. But it was only dual band for remote and telemetry. So when on O3 you were using it with just the goggles, the video link will always be on 5 gigs. And the goggles telemetry link will be on 5 gigs as well. If you used O3 though with the DJI FPV Remote 2, it would force the goggles and the telemetry, it would force the goggles telemetry link and the RC link down onto 2.4 gigs.
That's right.
But the video will always stay on 5 gigs. As a result of the change in the RF behavior, and now that the new remote communicates with the goggles, and the goggles communicate with the ear side,
it goes through.
DJI have dropped the 2.4 gigs mode on O4. It's not there at all. So it's single band. Whilst the goggles are dual band, O4 is single band, 5 gigs only. And I suspect actually in race mode, they're now moving the goggles telemetry back onto the same frequency as the video.
That makes sense.
For those who haven't seen my endless, ridiculously long sort of deep dives on the RF behavior, the original DJI FPV system, a bit like Cadex do on the Avatar, they matched the goggles telemetry link to the video frequency. So the goggles up would be on the same frequency as the video coming down. That would leave space on the band for other signals. O3 was very different. Video was on a channel, and then the goggles telemetry link was much bigger. Frequency hopping took up a much larger piece of space on the band. It would jump around the video link, maybe even on top of it, but it wasn't limited to it. Now, this would be an issue for like a racing situation, because if you had 5 pilots flying, you would not be able to have 5 sets of goggles in the air because they just would all talk over each other. So what I suspect DJI have done on race mode is that mode moves the goggles telemetry link back over the video link.
Yeah.
And that gives 8 spaces, and it is 8 channels in race mode, and that will give 8 spaces for up to 8 pilots to fly at once. But that may come at the downside of some behavior. I'm still expecting race mode to be dual 2-way. I don't think it won't be 2-way. I think it will be. Be interesting to look at. We're going to have to do all the RF testing, though, to understand this.
That'll be cool to see.
But from a systems perspective, it's now on the 5 gig span. So that really gives us an overview. And look, you're going to have to watch the reviews to understand the ins and outs of everything. But obviously, he'll be testing it a lot more as well when it comes out. Is there anything else you really want to add? Yeah, there's not really a lot more I can say at this point. I've not tried it. I've not seen it. I'm very lucky that information falls into my lap. We're now going to have to wait and see what the reviews say for, you know, the ins and outs of all of the little bits.
Yeah.
But what I would say is O4 is an evolution, not a revolution.
Yeah.
As I've said, if you really wanted to break O4 down, Pro, Avata 2, Action 4. So if you were happy with them, you're going to love the Pro. Yeah. Action camera replacement. The light is going... Standard is going to allow you to get it into lighter frames than ever before. Yeah. 1S I still think is problematic. We don't even know the current draw yet. We're going to have a look at that. Thermal performance. But I think the light is going to allow more interesting setups. So one final thing really is, what if you've already got a set of goggles or you don't? What would you buy or recommend today to get into this? Yeah, that's actually a good question, because I get a lot of questions on that myself as well. And people ask, you know, what should I buy? Well, look, as I've said already, V2s and V1s are out. So if you're on day one system, you're out. You're not compatible. So you will need new goggles. If you've already got goggles, what should you do? And I'm going to break this into a couple of sections. Okay. So if you are a V2 user, you get O3, but you won't be able to use O4. My advice to you is, if you're happy with your V2s and happy to continue to use your V2s on your older gear, then go get yourself a set of goggles 3. Okay. If you don't want to sell your V2s and upgrade, get yourself goggles 2 or Integra. Yeah. You're not going to be able to use race mode. Yeah, so if race mode's important to you, you're going to have to use goggles 3 anyway. Yeah. But get yourself goggles 2 or Integra, because at the point of this all releasing, goggles 2 and Integra will be the most widely compatible DJI goggle. Okay. The goggles 2 and Integra will support the original system on the new firmware, but you will lose WTOFS. Okay. So again, take that into account. But you will be able to use the original system air units. You can use O3, you can use Avata 2, you can use the Avatas, you can do all of that stuff, and you'll be able to use O4. Yeah. But you won't have race mode. Okay. If WTF is important to you on the older stuff, then I would just keep your V2s and go and get yourself a set of goggles 3. So hold on to them. If you're someone who has already got a set of goggles 2 or Integras, I'd just hang fire a minute and wait and see what this race mode's all about. That does make sense. How many people are really going to be racing DJI on day one? Probably not. It's a new mode they've introduced. No. Race mode on Cadex was basically unusable for most people anyway. It really didn't make a difference. I think I used it once. Let's see what this really does. How many people really need that 15 milliseconds of latency? Is DJI really going to be the #1 choice for racers? Probably no, it's not. Let's be honest with ourselves here. HD0 still has far more benefits 100%. For racing than DJI will. For sure. This is more a token racing mode, so I wouldn't run out and spend money. If you don't have anything at all, then just go and get goggles 3. Okay. That's the safest path forward. Okay. If you don't have anything at all, get the goggles 3. I do think the guys on V2s are in the most difficult position, because they are the most compromised. Because the V2 users have WTFOF, they have WTFOS on the older air units, so they have the lovely custom OSD and all of that. They can upgrade to the goggles 2, but they lose that, but they'll get support. And actually, I think V2 users are probably better keeping the V2s for the older stuff and buying a set of goggles 3. And then just jumping. Yeah. As for should anyone buy the N3? Oh, those over there. No. Okay. It's my answer on that. Unless you're looking for a spectator goggle. Okay. Yeah. That's about the only thing I would say on N3. If you're looking for a spectator goggle, that's the one to go for. All right. So, is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything else that you think is relevant for this launch? No, I think, look, as I've said, this isn't a video, it's not a review. From me personally on the channel, I'm going to be ordering them in, and when I do, I'll be making content, but I'm not going to be making content on day one.
Okay.
I might do a live unboxing.
Okay.
But look, I need weeks to test this. I need time to test this. Frankly, look, because I'm not involved, I won't have the early day views, so I'll hang back, I'll wait. What I intend to put out is content that no one else does.
Yeah.
And that's what my goal is. There's no point I will give a review. Yeah. There will be a review of this. But my overall goal will be to put out the content that no one else does. Yeah. The stuff on FPV Wiki, the stuff like that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, and I'm sure we will all look forward to that as well.
Thank you very much. I hope I haven't bored you to death. I have talked a lot, but yeah, hopefully it's enlightened people at least.
It has me, and look, I'd like to thank you for coming on board.
Look, guys, that's it on this one. Look after yourselves. Make sure you check out his channel. It is in the link below. Stay safe. Thank you, Ian, and I will speak to you soon. Now, I really do hope you found that interview interesting. Something that we didn't mention in that was pricing. I've heard that the Standard's going to be about $100 to $110, and the Pro is going to be about $200 to $240. I think it's probably going to come in $230, something like that for the Pro, but it isn't clear. There has been whispers around $200 as well. We'll just have to wait and see where the final pricing lands. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to him for coming and doing the interview. As you've seen, it is hard to get a word in edgeways with the bloke at times. He really does like to talk. He does know his stuff, but he does come across a bit smug and patronising at times as well. Something he definitely needs to do is stay out of his comment section, because I have seen him say a few things to people on there which I sort of think, I'm not sure I would do that personally. But in the end, what I have to say is, whilst there are a lot of people who might not like him, and there are a lot of people that think he's a big-headed twat, what I will say is he does know what he's talking about, and genuinely I do think he is trying to do the right thing, most of the time to his own detriment. If he actually just sort of got along with manufacturers a bit better and stopped saying some of the things he said, he probably would have been involved in this launch. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's his channel and his problem. Obviously, he's the one that's going to pay the price for saying what he thinks. Anyways, that's it. I hope you found this one interesting. Look after yourselves, stay safe, and I will speak to you soon. Now, before we wrap this one up, I just want to say, if you would like to support the channel to allow me to keep making content, not rely on manufacturers to send me equipment, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon. I want to say a huge thank you to all of my Patreons. We would not be able to do this without your support. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content in the future, please do consider checking it out. Also, please do check out the links to my FPV Wiki in the description as well. As I showed earlier, there's a lot of information on here about DJI and others, and I will also be uploading everything for DJI O4 on here once it releases as well.